Thank you all for being here. This is quite a crew. A lot of questions about this movie. We're going to try to move as quickly as we can and let everybody get a chance to chat. Leo, let's start with you. I think that the meltdown in the dressing room has become iconic already. Have you ever had a meltdown, a difficult day with lines like that?
No, certainly not to that degree, but I think we've all felt that at one point or another, certainly internally in our heads. I mean, a lot of the way this character was written was this sort of journey through television with Rick Dalton, and a lot of what you learn about who he is as a result of playing these various characters. And it came to a point with Quentin where we started to discuss about who, the real Rick Dalton is. And wouldn't it be, as he's having this sort of emotional crisis in his life and he's coming to terms with his own mortality in a lot of ways, wouldn't it be great to have a scene like that where it's the equivalent of going to school in your underwear, not knowing your lines in front of the entire crew and not being able to transcend that moment. So that resulted in Quentin then saying, okay, well, we have to see the aftermath of that. We have to see how he feels afterwards. So that was Quentin gave me a lot of these little bullet points of thoughts that I could do and improvise, and it was great fun. It was all in a trailer with Bob Richardson, and I got to smash the hell out of that little trailer. So it was a lot of fun.
Is that uncommon, working with Quentin, to get a chance to improvise a sequence like that?
I would say, I don't know if it's uncommon. I mean, he definitely gives you rein to improvise. But yeah, in a lot of ways, his words are, to a lot of us actors, Shakespearean. He's one of the best writer-directors there is. So you take his lines very seriously. You want to give him the goods. But when he lets you sort of go off and do your own thing, it's a lot of fun too.
Brad, as far as Cliff Booth goes, have you had Cliff Booths in your life? Have you had wingmen, stuntmen that you've bonded with and have maybe done things for you in the past?
Yeah, but they're women. All of them. Yeah.
So you're not pulling on any past experience from your career?
Well, there's a lineage with Cliff Booth from iconic characters. I think that, certainly I grew up with Clint Eastwood or Newman and even Burt Reynolds. And, for me, it was just a guy who wasn't at war with anything, not at war with himself. And that was a really nice place to hang out.
Did you identify with that guy?
Not much.
Bruce, what about you? This is I think your third film with Quentin now.
I was going to say it in English.
I think this is your third film with Quentin now.
For Quentin, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what do you guys talk about when he says he wants you to be a part of something? Why does he say he needs you for a role?
Well, let me tell you something about the Quentin experience. First of all, you're thrilled, especially if you've never been on an all-star team. Until this, I'd never been on an all-star team. So that was nice. The second thing is, he gives the actors an arena of freedom, even though he's right there. And he's got the little guy, Marty, correcting you if you don't say what's on the page. But occasionally, he'll let you dance. And he does that for everybody. And every single character in his movies has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And he's the engineer of all that. And he wrote the shit. He's sitting right there. But the thing that was most exciting for me on this movie is when I first came to Hollywood in 1959, we were lucky, my generation, because we still had a chance to work with the legends. And I worked on a movie now with the first two real legends in 25 years. They don't know it. You don't need to applaud that. They don't need to hear that. But the excitement of it all is, I once said when Prince died that we lost our Mozart. But you know who's kind of a Mozart? Quentin. Because he creates operas. He creates situations where you can't fail if you'll trust this. And everybody here in this movie on this stage came up with better stuff than I'd ever seen any of them do before. I'd never even seen this, and she just right, you know.
I don't think
She
anyone
was
had.
magical, but that's the magic of all this for me, because he likes to underdog cast. He likes to pick people that you don't expect to see doing things you don't expect them to do, and get you to go along with it for a day. I worked a day, an afternoon with him. And it was fabulous. It was magical. I mean, I don't know what Brad Pitt's going to say to me. He's from Missouri, you know. They can't even win at home anymore. But I relish the experience, and I relish the opportunity to be put on the level I was on with him. That's the excitement for me.
Victoria, I have a question for you down the end. When you're building a gigantic, incredible cast like this, and it's pulling from a lot of real people, is it easier when you have something to compare against, or is it more difficult when you know that there's some real-life counterparts?
I think it's more difficult. There's more pressure to kind of get it right, because everyone has an idea of, obviously who Sharon Tate was, who all these real characters were. And it just puts a little more pressure on the casting process, because you don't want to just cast a look-alike. You kind of want to cast someone who's going to give you the essence of the person and hopefully bear a resemblance. So it's just a little trickier, but it was really fun doing it with Quentin. I mean, just really great.
Who was the hardest person to find, to land on?
Boy. That's, wow, okay.
Was it Leo? You can say it if it was Leo.
I was going to say Brad Pitt, but no, they were all challenging, but I think, well, maybe Julia's part. I think that was the one we were kind of worried about the most, but she came in pretty early on and kind of blew us away through a series of 4 or 5 auditions. And Quentin kept giving her kind of a little tougher thing to do with each session to see if she'd rise to the occasion, and she rose to it.
Julia, what was that like for you? 4 or 5 auditions is a lot.
It was a lot, but it was fun. It was genuinely amazing. The first audition, I remember him coming out, and he was instantly so enthusiastic. he was like, "Hey, hi, yeah, come right on in." And so we went into a glass room. And by the way, I had no idea who he was. Quentin Tarantino is not a kid's director, so definitely not. And so I had no idea who this guy was. He might have just been one of those directors, for all I knew.
Wow.
And then
I don't know what that means.
Vicky was there, and we instantly had so much fun. He said, "So when I was writing it," and of course, not knowing who he was, I said, "Oh, you wrote it? Well done." And he just beamed. He was, "Oh, she doesn't know who I am." Okay. And then we were just laughing so hard throughout the whole thing. And I came out and I was doing leprechaun kicks the whole way home. And the rest of the auditions and callbacks were like that. It was just all fun. Same with actually filming. He's a genuinely good guy who makes genuinely good films.
We finished the read-through, and we were all in the room. We were all saying goodbye to each other, and I was saying bye to Julia, and she said, "Brad, you did a very good job in the read-through." I said, "Thank you, Julia."
And then he just drives away on his motorcycle.
Mike and Zoe, I have a question for both of you guys. I read that Quentin wanted the stunts to be done the way that they might have been done during the time period. I don't know necessarily what that means, but maybe you can help us understand, especially for that fight sequence.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of discussion about. Quentin's always quite authenticity is obviously paramount to him. He's also lives in this heightened world and creates this heightened world, but for the most part, my experience with him is avoiding CGI when and if possible. If we can use practical effects, use practical effects. I think when it came to something as important as his lead stuntman character fighting Bruce Lee, there's a lot of conversation that goes in to that. There wasn't a lot of CGI. Mike did his own stunts. We did have him in wires. I won't tell you too much more about it because Quentin might fire me. But there was a lot of not wanting to do trickery. So there was a lot of working with Brad and getting the style that fit him best and spoke to the character the best. Obviously, Mike's got a pool of talent as a stunt coordinator. I'm a stunt coordinator as a fighter. I'm just going to blow your trumpet for a minute, so pretend you can't hear me. So there was a lot of getting those guys comfortable with the characters that they were playing and then getting them comfortable with each other, because we wanted to be able to have it that if the choreography changed on the day, them in character could step into that and bounce off each other rather than being locked into the choreography so much that, it's sort of the like Quentin we're talking about with the dialogue, is his dialogue tends to be very specific and genius as it is. I hate to bandy that word around, but he's open to inspiration that comes from how an actor delivers that. I wanted to sort of supply him with the same structure with the fight choreography and with these guys with their training. But really a lot of it was talking about when we're shooting something that is set. So if we're on the set, this is where it gets a bit meta, so bear with me. If you're on the set, we're shooting something from a TV show that's shot in the 60s, then we want it to look like it's in the 60s. So there's dust hits, there's not blood squibs, there's not the same pyrotechnics that we would use nowadays. But when we're shooting it in the real day of the real characters, then we are using the technologies that we can, such as wires, because we are tricking the audience into thinking that's happening in real life. Is that making sense? Okay, thank God. Your turn, Mike.
Mike, what about for you? You have to both replicate Bruce's physical representation and also look like you can credibly train someone too, because you're training actors in the film.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like, trying to get that right?
I think the cool thing about Bruce's role in the film is it's not just that one scene. It's it's training Jay, it's training Margot, and that speaks to how ingrained Bruce was, especially at that time when he was still fighting his way to becoming the superstar that he would eventually become. And I just want to add on to Zoe's talking about the stunts. I need to give a huge credit to Brad, because we worked in that stunt room for weeks, and he spent more time than anybody had any right to. He would skip lunches, and it was fun. I was just saying that I miss being in that room training, with Brad and with Zoe and with Rob, our fight coordinator. So, all credit to Brad for being willing to do all that stuff as well. So thank you, Brad.
A little clarification. Brad had to spend weeks learning. Mike knew it. And in full confession, Mike had to slow down for Brad. He's that fast. And it was a pleasure.
Dakota and Emile and Tim, you guys all play real life figures, different kinds of figures in history. Dakota, the movie takes a pretty dark turn when you show up. You are quite intense in the film. Squeaky is a quite intense historical figure. What kind of work did you do to replicate her particular kind of madness?
I don't know if I could ever fully replicate some of the videos of her that Quentin sent to me, but I think for me the physical transformation was the coolest part. I have blue eyes, so I wore brown contact lenses and, dyed my hair red, and Heba did an amazing job of sort of like putting freckles all over me, and I did not feel like myself at all. and kind of would sort of walk around. The first time I walked on set, I felt like people didn't really know who I was. I was like, hey, like I did not feel like myself. So that was really a fun part of it. And I mean, this has just been a dream come true to be in a movie with Quentin. So I would have played any character, but it was really kind of a cherry on top to get to play, someone that's memorable, and it's a cool part of the film, and it does sort of take the dark turn when I come in. So that was very exciting to be a part of that.
Emile, what about you? I feel like Jay Sebring is the kind of person you read about a lot nowadays, but we don't have a lot of physical representation. We don't necessarily understand how he moved, what kind of guy he was. How did you get into his head?
Well, I saw some pictures of him, and he was really skinny, so I went on a extreme vegan diet where I would just boil vegetables and eat this hot sauce vinegar vegetable stew at the end of each night. And so I was really hungry. So that was like, I lost like 25 pounds, and it was like, it's a small part. And Quentin was like, really, you're going to lose all the weight for this? I was like, I want to look just like him in the picture. And Jay Sebring, the videos, I watched a few videos, and Sebring in the videos, at least, he seemed like kind of a serious guy. So I sort of did that in the table read. And Quentin called me after. He's like, what happened, buddy? And I was like, oh, it's just like doing the Jay. He's like, yeah. He's like, you have permission to be flamboyant. He's like, Jay's not gay, but he's flamboyant. So after that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like lighten him up a little bit. The end.
Tim, did you get that note too, the flamboyant note?
Yeah, I always get that note.
You're used to being a TV cowboy, so this isn't necessarily a stretch, but Jim Stacy, different kind of person, different kind of actor.
It's not a fucking stretch. It's a stretch. I've been a TV cowboy and not around all these people. It makes you nervous.
Were you nervous on set?
I was excited. This was it's good to be here kind of a good to be here kind of gig.
Dude, I was out of my mind nervous.
Really?
I am currently out of my mind.
I've sort of adopted, I've gone into the, it just is what it is, and what it is really great. And that includes moments like this. It's really great. God bless you.
Margaret, I love your performance too. I feel like it's...
Wait, I want to talk more.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Sorry. No,
you got your applause line, man.
You're right. I apologize. It's all you. You got your microphone? You were worried about this moment. You were worried about it, but I can't protect you anymore. You're on your own.
Tim can step in whenever he wants. I feel like you are giving almost like a silent movie performance, Margaret. You're very physical, you're dancing, you're very outsized. All that feels very intentional. Is that something that you and Quentin talked about? Was that on the page? Is that something that you brought to it? Just the sort of outsized physical performance that you brought?
Oh, gee. We didn't really talk about that necessarily too much. I think I danced a lot growing up, and I think I just made the mistake in everything that I do that I just accidentally seem like a dancer. So no, I don't think my character was supposed to really be like that necessarily. But yeah, he was really encouraging, and then like everybody else has kind of said, and gives you space to play, and I think that he would encourage me to do strange physical things.
I think Margaret came up with that performance herself. You came up with that performance, not to take anything away from Quentin, but I think he kind of missed it on the first time he saw your tape. And he kind of said, we don't have this part, we don't have this part. We kind of went and read a whole bunch of other people. And then he went back through the tapes and saw you, and he went, oh. He actually, I think, really for the first time saw what you were doing and recognized, oh, this is something really unique and unusual. And he called me and says, there's somebody, it's Margaret Qualley. I said, well, she's great, Quentin. I didn't know, maybe she was a little too weird for you or what was going on, but,
Awesome.
But she's like, she's cool. And another thing about Dakota, when Dakota came in to read, Quentin read with her, and he read Brad's part. I have a glass door between my office and the hallway, and Quentin, Dakota was on the other side, Quentin was on this side, and walked up to the the door, knocked, and opened it. Dakota came in. They started doing the scene, and Quentin acted the whole scene with her. And she scared him. She scared the shit out of him. He literally took a step back, and after he left, he went. I mean, you were great. You're really great.
Julia, I want to ask you about your work with Leo. Were you familiar with Leonardo DiCaprio's film career?
No. Can't look at you right now. Sorry.
Was it easy for you then to be this powerful, kind of haughty young woman telling Rick what's what on the set?
No, but it was definitely an interesting experience. I mean, I knew his name. I wasn't familiar with his work, but I knew he was a well-known actor. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be struggling with all these serious actors in this movie. And I was nervous, and then he really just made it so much more friendly than I thought it would be. Like, he was so enthusiastic. Like, he seemed like a friend and a colleague, of course. But definitely, he taught me to be very professional and to be focused. And
wait, he taught you that?
I learned off of his actions.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I feel like you would be better at this than me, too, if you'd like to do my job for the rest of this, no? Leo, what about you working with a young child actor?
She was incredible. I mean, the way that Quentin sort of described Julia's character to me was like a young Meryl Streep. And when you read the screenplay, you're like, wow, she's talking about preparing for her role and wanting to be called by her character's name. And I met, Julia. Not only did she have all of her lines completely memorized before the first table read-through, she was the most professional, most connected young actor I've ever worked with. I mean, she listened to everything that everyone had to say, and she was just so present. And I look at you as a friend and colleague as well.
Thank you.
Leo, I also feel like there's something very physical in your performance. There's a lot of scratching and the stammer, and it's an unusual kind of thing that you're trying to create, and it's jumped out more the more times I've seen the movie. What kind of conversations did you and Quentin have? How did you bring that to the character?
Yeah, those are all things that you try to weave into the fabric, I suppose, of the overall. There's just certain things about Rick at this turning point in his life that kind of made sense. The stammering came from a friend that I have that sort of, I don't want to describe him in great detail, but there's a nervous energy to him and what his future may hold, and it comes out in certain moments, and there's definitely a feeling that Rick is if not a severe alcoholic, he's on his way to be a severe alcoholic. But as I said before, he's kind of, with that first sequence, and a lot of that was edited down with Al Pacino, gave this great description of what Rick's been through in his entire career, the turning point of what culturally is going on in 1969, but also this whole idea of an actor that had his big shot in television, and does he have what it takes to make that transition into this new era of sort of director-driven films, and is he going to sort of transcend his own insecurity and self-doubt to make that, or will he just be happy and accept the fact that he loves being an actor? And that's what Julia's character really sort of symbolizes in a lot of ways. Hey man, you're here, you're working. Life is pretty damn good. He's so consistently feeling sorry for himself. So all that character stuff, I suppose, it just wove its way into who Rick was in a sort of thoughtful, organic way with conversations with Quentin.
Brad, what about you? This sort of the opposite is true for you. You're very still in the movie. You mentioned Clint Eastwood. Were there other people, archetypal figures that you and Quentin talked about to sort of try to replicate their screen presence?
No. I mean, we talked a lot about the great actor-stunt relationships that they had at that time, like Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham. We talked about Steve McQueen and Bud Eakins, I got to meet before he passed. And you know those guys. My dad ran a trucking company. I was on the loading docks a lot. And you just see these very stoic individuals that, that seem to like enjoy their place, and there seems to be really great strength in that silence. And I don't know, that's always stuck with me, I guess, or been interesting to me. But it's easy to. I mean, we had Leo was bouncing around and giving me, it was very easy for me to be able to watch and to sit because of the great performances happening around me. So it was a really nice place to sit.
What was so interesting, just from the perspective of all of us kind of doing these mini films within a film, was being able to watch the movie for the first time. I mean, I had my whole sequences, Brad had his, and so many other characters had these moments that I never got to see. It was almost like we're in these sort of compartmentalized versions of this movie. And then getting to finally see, Brad and I had some sequences together, but seeing this sort of amazing portrayal of what Brad did is really not easy to do. You have to go back to Elaine Delon or Steve McQueen, that kind of subtle power. It was so striking when I first saw it, and so many of the other actors. It was just amazing to see all that they put into their roles, because we weren't together every day. There were just kind of days where we'd fade in and out of seeing one another. So kudos to all of you.
Because there's so much sanctity around a Tarantino script, I was wondering if anybody here on this panel had a moment trying to run lines, maybe while having a drink or two, the way that Leo's character does in the pool.
Wow.
I did. The first time Quentin cast me in anything was the first time I had been cast in anything, and I was playing quite a substantial... I had a lot of lines, and I'd never really run lines before, and I literally said to him, you have to tell me what to do, because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to prepare for this. And he told me to not go to any acting classes. He told me to not learn, teach, be taught or shaped by anyone, because he knew what he wanted and he knew how to get it. He then said, learn your lines inside out and backwards. And I said, cool, how do I do that? And he said, get a dictaphone. So I literally learnt my lines the way Rick learns his lines. That's literally, when I read it in the script, I was like, I'm kind of like Rick right now.
Bruce, is that familiar to you, that style?
I was just going to say, it's so nice that we're in front of all of you and we're part of you and so forth and so on. But the thing that this movie says to me more, and I've done a lot of movies, that this does more than any movie I've ever been in. It is a suggestion to all of us. Don't worry so much about the acting, worry about the behavior. And the behavior in this movie from start to end is real. And I don't ever judge people on, are they good actors? I don't know. I began early on with Mr. Kazan, and he instructed me as well as beat it into me. You're there because we cast you. Don't be afraid to use you. And the thing that I like about this movie is I go down, this is the third time I watch it tonight, and it's a collective behavior that I have not seen in my career from top to bottom. And you look down at Zoe, and Zoe is great in her scene. She was a stagecoach driver in Hateful Eight. You know, so I mean, you're looking at it's like he can get you. I think the biggest word of all is he makes it fun. And movies should be fun. They shouldn't be some grim death march.
I feel like that's the right place to end. Movies should be fun and not some grim death march. Anybody have any closing thoughts on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Okay.
It was really a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Victoria Thomas, Zoe Bell, Mike Moe, Dakota Fanning, Emile Hirsch, Margaret Qualley, Timothy Olyphant, Julia Butters, Bruce Dern, Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Thank you.